This is sort of one of my favourite works in the show. It's a striking work. It's very connected to the experience of going to Raoul Island. So it's called Inner Raoul. It's about, I guess, instead of the experience on the ship, getting there and carrying on, it's really about the time we're on the island. Is that right, Liz?
Yes, it does. So lots of like nekā palms and, New Zealand trees and bush and birds and some of it slightly different. The actual trees were thicker or thinner, and the pūtekau leaves were more rounded than they were in New Zealand. And there were these, incredible beds of green, of lichen, and the berries were being dropped. And so I made like a little grid of red berries on the green, and it was kind of like, it was just really nice to make a little marker that was very temporary. But and we thought, oh gosh, it would be great to have spent a bit more time there. But anyway, there were lots of seabirds, petrel, making nests in the lichen and the banks and things. And so the island, well, there's been massive earthquakes there today, and it's an active volcano and has masses of hurricanes coming through and wiping things out. But then there's a sort of tenderness within, and the birds, we could see the chicks and the banks and the hollows, and beautiful fungi and plants, flowers that might just appear overnight and then go again. And I was thinking about the internal volatility of the island, and then this kind of beautiful, sort of tenacious, fragile environment above. And so when we came back to New Zealand, I started making these works, and they look like kind of cushions. They could be soft in that same sort of way of nesting and kind of protection. And while I didn't actually use images of things that I took to for locating those ideas, it's just using things that I associated with. So I used corals and plant cells and blood cells and viruses and bacteria, all sorts of things that actually, for me, had the association of my experience there. And so we've got reds and greens. So we've got the red blood cells, and then I've actually made them green as well. So they're not really, I suppose the blood cells could be associated with the heat within the lava and stuff like that. But then you've got the greens of the lichen, and there were corals around, although we didn't get to go in the sea. Yeah.
I suppose I like also the element in the work, which I think is totally about New Zealand as a place that is subtropical, as well as being all the other things that it is. New Zealand as a territory is quite remarkable in that it does go all the way up, almost to the Tropic of Capricorn, if you include the territories of Raoul Island. Because I do think for all of us that experience did change the shape of New Zealand. But also I think you could say when you look at a book, at a work like this, it almost changes the palette of New Zealand too. I guess as people brought up on Colin McCann and Tos Williston, it's such a adrenaline rush to go somewhere where you do see and feel those colours and those kinds of energies, which are very much tropical. I mean, they're more like Brazil and Dunedin, really, but they are part of Aotearoa. They're part of where we live and how we live here. I think of it as almost like a specimen box, or it's almost like little blocks of watercolour in a watercolour block too. But to me, they're kind of like little core samples of a kind of a teeming, effusive kind of reality, which is part of nature here, And I guess that's another conversation. But really, to me, Liz's work does sort of come out of that tradition that was, Rita Angus painting landscapes, in the Canterbury region, McCann looking at, Otago, Central Otago, North Otago, South Canterbury. These are works about what is this place that we're walking around on? What does this ground mean? How does it affect us? And how do we feel about it? And how do we treat it? Which I guess brings in this environmental thing, to me, which so many of the works do sort of hint at, Snake River. Snake River is interesting because there's a title that's very biblical. It's the Garden of Eden. Yeah. This thinking around nature that's in the show and in the work in Raoul is this idea that there is a paradise here. Nature can be pristine, but like art, it does have danger and strangeness written into it all the time. Raoul Island being a very kind of vivid case of that because of, the danger of the place as well as the extremely seductive, sensual beauty. But also I think the Snake River, to me it's a beautiful form, but it's also the form of a snake, which has a negative thing. But then that's the form we want in our braided rivers. We don't want our rivers turned into canals for irrigation, So in a way, the form of Snake River is a necessary, beautiful, life-sustaining form. It has energy and purpose in it beyond human will, So to me, that's a big thing all through the show, is that just this human beings renegotiating how we touch the physical world around us and how we deal with it.